Hi, Michel. Welcome to Paris. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you about one of your books that I love called Working with Machines. Um, as far as I know, it's one of the rare books on that subject, or at least it goes into as much detail as you do. And it's about a subject which is very close to my heart, which is the relationship between the worker, the man, or the woman on the factory floor, and the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what made you want to write the book and what the main messages are?
Well, what made me write it is that it's putting together systems that involve people and machines is something that's absolutely central to manufacturing.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the things that I learned from Kay Abe early in my career in consulting. And there are a number of techniques like the work combination chart, which is very typical of that approach. And there is not very much that is written about that in English. You have books about automation, but the books about automation in English, the American books about automation, say about nothing about people. It's like it's an afterthought. You can look at books on flexible manufacturing systems. You see FMSs, you see diagrams of machines. You never see any information about what people are supposed to be doing with these machines. And
you're right. It's not only is it a rare book dealing with the subject, but also the industry average, the practices throughout the world on the subject are very poor. I mean, the user friendliness, or whatever you want to call it, the relationship that you have between the person operating the machine and the machine, just seems far away from where it should be. But maybe I'm wrong. I get the impression that organizations such as Toyota, for instance, have spent more time trying to get that relationship right than others.
I think
it's
key
therefore
reason,
one of the misunderstood keys of lean.
Yeah, I think you're correct. It's a very important part of lean that is misunderstood, and most of the American literature doesn't cover it at all. But I think the key reason why the user interface of production machines is so bad is because production machines aren't bought by the people who use them.
Yeah.
And if you look at household appliances, they have much better user interfaces than production machines because they're used by the people who buy them, and so the suppliers have a reason to pay attention to this particular issues. And as a consequence of that, it's very useful when you're thinking of what would be a good user interface for a production machine to look at what user interfaces do washing machines have, or dishwashers, or stoves. There are lessons to be learned on how to do it in factories from that. And there are people in the US who've done very good work in that area. I'm thinking particularly of Don Norman with the design of everyday things. That has a lot of, it's not just that you need to pay attention to the user, but he gives you a number of rules, such as he talks about things like affordances, which is if you have a control on a machine, the shape of that control suggests how you should be using it. If you have a button, it means push me. If you have a hook, it means pull me. Things like that. And when the user interface to the operator interface to a production machine is built on this principle, miraculously it's a lot easier to train people to use them because they naturally gravitate towards the proper way of using them.
Okay.
And that's only at the basic level. There are some more subtle issues.
Okay. You mentioned a combination chart. What is that?
So the work combination chart, that's at a higher level. That's what standard work is in the Toyota production system. And the work combination chart is a chart that shows the path of an operator going through multiple stations, and the time the operator spends at each station, and the manual work cycle on each machine, and the automatic work cycle. And it's a graphic simulation tool which enables you to map the path of the operator through all these different stations, returning to his point of origin, doing all of that within the takt time, and being utilized for most of that time. it's a tool that's not used very much and not known to a lot of people who are lean consultants, but it's a tool that allows you to gain to double the productivity increase that you can get from changing, for example, from organizing a cell. Essentially, if you're not using that tool when designing a cell in machining, for example, you're leaving half the productivity improvement on the table easily. And so it's a very it's a tool that I have found extremely useful. It's not that easy to use, but it's worth the effort because of the benefits you get from it. But
so, just to make sure I've understood, you're saying that especially there are many more things that you've mentioned, but one of them that is maybe the most surprising is that when one is designing a layout or changing the layout of a machine, of machines, a cell or whatever, you're surprised that in fact they're not taking into account what the worker's life is going to be there, and there's a tool called the combination chart which could be used to work out precisely how he's going to live there.
Yes.
And they don't do that, and so they end up with an environment in which the operator is condemned forever to be wasting time because he has to do that rather than that.
Well, it's not just that rather than that. It's just that in order to do another task, he would have to walk all the way around the machine,
absolutely.
Which means that somebody else has to do it.
Okay, yes, I should have mentioned that. The number of times we see somebody who has to walk around his machine for something is always surprising.
And the other operator, let's say if the volume goes down, the other operator still has to be there. Whereas if it were arranged differently, this operator could stand in for the other one who could be used at some other point, other place in the factory. And if you use this tool, it makes you design the jobs so that they're easy to do within the task time. But it's a higher level concept. The book starts with the low level issues, which is one operator, one machine, and how does that operator work with the machine, and it goes up from there to how do you design a job for an operator that involves him with multiple machines. And when you improve that, you end up using fewer people with the same machine. That means you're automating the process. And so this is all related to automation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And when people talk about Jidoka, they usually say it's a quality control thing. The machine stops when the part when it breaks apart. That's not all it is. It's primarily an automation strategy. And part of that automation strategy is making sure the machine stops when it starts misbehaving. Mm-hmm. But it's also a strategy to automate the process.
Yeah.
And to do it stepwise in a way that you start with a production line that needs 5 people to run it, and then you make some improvement, bring it down to 4, then you bring it down to 3, then you bring it up to 1, then you never bring it down to completely 0, but by the time you have old machines to which you've retrofitted all sorts of devices that enable you to work at a very high level of productivity with it, mm-hmm. Like maybe one operator for 20 machines.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you do, you design another line, and you apply everything you've learned from doing that in designing another line which doesn't look anything like the previous one. Mm-hmm. So it's part of that continuum, and it always involves thinking about what role are people going to play in the production cycle.
Okay. We've talked about this before. I just wanted to go through it again. I'm desperately disappointed by Autonomation, as it's sometimes been called, or Jidoka, the idea that you can go from 5 to 4 people in a work environment, and that is, if we go back to one of the first presentations of what people call the Toyota Way or Lean today, I'm thinking of Taishi Ono's first book. He said, automation was one of his 2 pillars at the time, and it's obviously something he thought was very important, and yet that seems to have got lost in translation.
It has been, yes. I mean, there are a few people in the U.S., I'm thinking, for example, of Art Smalley, who know exactly what this is about, and who writes about it and talks about it. But most of the American literature on lean doesn't go anywhere near that.
Why? It's the same here in Europe.
Well, I think a lot has to do with the fact that the people who are writing it are not engineers. I think it's that simple.
Yeah, that's the feeling I have. It's to be able to deal with that subject. You have to be somebody who's at ease with the designing machines and an engineer. It's not a managerial issue anymore.
It's not psychology. It's not sociology. It's not even logistics. It's really technology.
So would you agree, or am I pushing things too far, that unfortunately many adaptations or translations of Lean, the Toyota way, have lost a significant part of the technical content?
Oh yes. No, when I started in this business, the consultancy I joined, KA-based consultancy, was called Management and Technology Japan.
Right.
And KA-based philosophy was that you have to address the technical and the managerial issues jointly.
Right.
If you only work on the technology, if you only work on the engineering side, if you only work on operator workstations and how they are laid out, and that's not enough. You also have to work on the managerial side. If you only work on the managerial side, you're missing that whole dimension. You have to address both, and it means that you have to be able to deal with this kind of issues on the shop floor with operators, technicians, and engineers in the morning, and then address the company board in the afternoon.
Well, thank you very much. Fascinating, because working with machines or integrating better the technical aspects, or again thinking more about the system man plus machine, is something that's important, that Toyota has always been doing, that people who are trying to do the same have missed out on. So let's hope that people who are listening will think about that, because the technical aspects of all this are important and can make a big difference to the performance of what they're doing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.